Hey everybody, welcome back to the Matt Report. Shawn DeWolfe joining us for the 3,785th time of the podcast, because that's how long it takes to get a good recording with Shawn and I. Shawn, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
Some technical snafus, but we're working through it. This interview should be awesome because we've practiced it many times now.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, old pros at this interview.
Yeah. Who is Shawn DeWolfe? He is the founder and co-founder and partner of the DeWolfes, DeWolfes.com consulting firm, and he's running a little new product called Share Cluster plugin that we're going to talk about. And he also has some experience with the D word Drupal that we're also going to get into, because as you all know, I secretly do love Drupal, and I love talking about the transition from a Drupal project to a WordPress project. But before I continue, Shawn, who are you and what do you do?
Pardon me. I'm Shawn DeWolfe. I'm a PHP developer and programmer who moved into doing WordPress and Drupal development several years back. I run out of Victoria a web design house that does largely web development in Drupal and WordPress. But the reason why we set this up formally in 2010 to get going was to get into product development, to develop applications, plugins, add-ons, and get things going. I really like WordPress, so the first actual product, full product I just came up recently, that's the aforementioned Share Cluster.
Yeah, so Share Cluster is the new product on your plate, and I do want to dive into that, but real quick, let's just talk, and we talked about this in our last interview that hasn't aired, secretly hidden in the archives of the Matt Report, deep in the basement. What is it like to be somebody who's comparing these two platforms, Drupal versus WordPress? What's the biggest difference that you see in the use case of these platforms, specifically to large amounts of content too?
Large amounts of content, I would say Drupal has a lot of capacity for complexity. In other words, you can make up really elaborate data models that are content types. They're good for handling large bodies of users and large user communities in Drupal, and it has a lot of capacity there to kind of basically you're building large structures with Drupal. WordPress is a lot better at just saying that this morning I want a website, tonight you have it. That it's very easy to get a complete WordPress installed together, and that's the big winning point for me with WordPress. Why it just seems like it's caught on so well, because people don't have to angst over the data models and the many steps and the inner workings that happen in a Drupal install. Like WordPress, the idea of WordPress is it seems like you're driving towards results.
One of the questions that I used to ask a lot of, and sort of pulled away from it, I don't know why, I should just keep reintroducing it or asking everybody, but how do we deal with a $500 client, right? And I think that that is very important for the freelancer who might say, yeah, I can do a job in an hour and it's $500. It's $500 an hour. That's awesome. But then there are those clients who want you to build a Facebook for $500. Do you think inherently that it's because of the adoption of WordPress and how easy it is to use that it's sort of bringing in that very low bargain basement customer or client, thinking that they can do all these things with plugins and themes, and really it should only cost them $500 because it's so darn easy to use? Do you think that's an inherent problem with WordPress, or does Drupal get that, or does any industry get that?
I think it really has crept in because of how easy it is to do stuff online. And if you go to WordPress.com or you go to some hosted place where you can do an install with Drupal, you kind of get that illusion that self-surgery is okay, that you can do something complex real fast. And I had a conversation earlier this week with somebody where we talked about building the spec and making that an isolated piece from the rest of the project. And I said, at the end of the specking process, you'll have everything you need to know about how to proceed. And somebody in the conversation stopped and said, yeah, you'll have everything you need, but you won't necessarily be able to go ahead because the complexity of what you're trying to deliver is still a secret sauce, still the piece that people have to do. And developers who have some time in WordPress or Drupal will identify really strong modules, really weak plugins. They'll identify things that work well, and they'll have a real good speed course for how to deliver something elaborate fast. And I think the $500 clients are still hoping for elaborate fast, but it's it's going to be time consuming. In some cases, you'll sometimes ask for a level of complexity that they'll just take a lot of time, much more than what a $500 website could see happen.
How are you handling that in your business today? If somebody comes to, I mean, or maybe your answer might be, Matt, I don't even get those anymore because we've sort of changed our brand or elevated our game or whatever. But if you do get somebody knocking on the door that says, hey, can you build this for $500? Are you spinning that into a consulting session? Are you telling them to go check out like an Odesk or referring them somewhere else? What do you do for that $500 client?
I usually, if they're asking for a $500 full-on, like, mini Facebook, I will try to do some reality check and some education on that, and simply talk to them about what the complexity is that's involved, and say to them that a $500 result could be much more costly for them outside the technical realm because of all the gotchas, all the things that didn't happen, or a lot of them will usually want something and they want it tweaked to their satisfaction, so they don't want it out of the box. If it's out of the box, I mean, you could probably slam in a half dozen plugins pretty fast inside of that hour or two to load their site, but then they're going to have a real baseline experience. And I say to them that you're not going to be satisfied with baseline experience, so you need to come up with an understanding of what you really want. And by and large, I will try to talk the $500 clients out of doing it, period, even if it's me or somebody else. But I am past the stage now where the $500 clients are something I'm going to take on, because I find it's this weird inverse scenario, and I've heard other people on the show talk about this too, where the more money you ask for, the less trouble the project is. And that a $500 project will be 10 times the problem of a $1,000 project. And it's just this weird gap building that happens, and that's why, principally because of that, I run from the $500 clients.
Yeah, it's so true, and what looks like $500. The reason why they're at a level of a $500 budget is perhaps that maybe they're just launching something and they're not even sure that what they need is this application that they've dreamt up, right? They're just not experienced enough, and that's totally cool. And there is a market for that. My friend Ryan Sullivan wrote a blog post about that, and specifically about me asking the question of the $500 client, and he embraces the $500 client, and that's awesome. And I think that's it all depends on where you are in your agency and your freelance business, and on that client, right? If they understand that they have a smaller budget, but they're willing to work with you and say, okay, you can sort of consult me for $500 and build this thing with some plugins. That's cool, and I accept it. But very few accept it. They want everything, right? Because just like you said, they're sometimes more trouble than it should be. Let's specifically talk now about the difference in developers that you've seen. You've got a virtual team, you're building a team, you've built a team, you've worked on teams. Mm-hmm. The difference in WordPress developers versus a Drupal developer, or are you just looking at it sort of platform agnostic and I'm just a PHP developer and we can work on both?
I find that you need familiarity in both of those CMSs because there's a lot of specifics in them, and some people will build stuff out long form and say, this is how you build a PHP code to satisfy its use. And go, well, no, actually just call this Drupal function and it does everything you want. Or you just call this piece of WordPress and it's exactly what you want. And getting a generalist who maybe isn't experienced with PHP and is otherwise very experienced is the trick of saying you've got to really leverage the CMS system so you get the most out of it. So that way it's the most rapid development you can achieve. And that's a bit of a perceptual thing of them because they always want to build stuff. I remember a conversation way back about K-lots, about how many lines of code you generate. And for me, the more code you generate isn't necessarily a better result. It's the better learning the result is the win. And getting there in as few steps as possible.
Awesome. The types of projects that you're used to, in the Drupal space, are you seeing a clear difference? I guess let me back it up. So, are you seeing a clear difference in the projects that you're working on, Drupal versus WordPress? Are you still doing the more content stuff on the Drupal side, and doing more of the sort of more straightforward projects on WordPress? Are you still making that clear line, or now that you're using WordPress more, you might be shifting sort of some more big content projects to the WordPress side?
I'm making a delineation. I'm working on basically an online community, and that is a Drupal thing. But I'm just about to get into my next project, which is also an online community, but the scope is a little more refined, and the client has preference for WordPress, so I'm running with that. Where they're good at WordPress. WordPress's UI is a lot more user friendly for people who want to actually have some level of administration when they take over the website. So for me, that's a big win. It's much easier to manage a WordPress site than it is a Drupal site because Drupal gives you so much, and then you have to either give the administrator really pared down user rights or give them kind of this 747 jet console look, which is sometimes too much for them because there are literally hundreds of options that you control and some of them have big ramifications. And WordPress is nice that it has that clarity. So I am trying to push people towards WordPress more than Drupal and satisfy them through what WordPress plugins can offer.
If you were to just take a step back and look at Drupal versus WordPress, what's one thing you would want inside of WordPress that Drupal does really well, and then vice versa? What would you want in Drupal that WordPress does really well?
In WordPress, it would be nice to see a lot more granular user rights out of the box, because right now the rules are a little bit fine, or they're a little bit generalistic, and they cut a little bit broad. That sort of really atomic control in Drupal for user access permissions is tremendous because then you can really fine tune who gets what and let everyone kind of play safely. Again, getting away from the simple console, right, from the cockpit, making it simpler for them. It's a lot more capable in Drupal if you really lock those user settings. What I would like to see Drupal get that WordPress has is WordPress seems to be a lot more fluid in its compatibility. So if you plunk in an older plugin or you have an older installed WordPress, there's a little bit of grace there. And a hard break between Drupal versions means that you're seeing a die-off in between each version jump. So I'm kind of fearful as Drupal 8's coming around the corner because all these beloved Drupal 6 modules, a whole bunch of them just didn't become Drupal 7 modules. And I think we're going to see it again that Drupal 8, we're going to see a lot of modules not happen in Drupal 8. So that means that when I used to go back and lean on this real nice old chestnut, now I can't. It's not going to be there for Drupal 8 project. So I'm either having to build it, evolve it, find an alternative, or just do it out, which means that it may be a critical piece, which means I may not be able to do the project in Drupal without coding all that from scratch.
Yeah, that's sort of a tail end when I got out of Drupal. That was, maybe right when Drupal 6 sort of launched or shortly after. And I remember the big drop off of version 5 modules not coming over, and then a lot of people didn't go from 4 to 5. A lot of people were still on 4, so they were afraid to make the jump or they couldn't make the jump from 4 to 6 because then there was a whole bunch of stuff that got lost. It's funny to see that it's almost like version 5 wasn't really adopted. Version 6 was. Version 7 was kind of on the fence, and now everyone's saying like, oh, 8's going to be awesome, and it looks almost like every time they come out with another one, it's always the next version that everybody's looking forward to.
Yeah, well, what freaks me out about Drupal 8 is if you look at the memory consumption they're talking about and the size of the code base, those are all bigger, and it freaks me out that they're using bigger to get better. When I just and again, they're going to Symfony as their underlying architecture, which is a big shift away from what they were doing prior, almost entirely object-oriented stuff. So that's really a nice changes they're heading towards in Drupal 8. But I just, I'm still waiting to see what Drupal 8 looks like when it's out in the wild.
Yeah, building a product is not easy, as you and I both know. Speaking of products,
Speaking of products.
We got a plugin called Share Cluster. You recently launched it in the WordPress repo back on July 11th,
Yes.
and you're pushing forward with that. How did you come about? First, set the stage what Share Cluster does. I see that you're able to share content from other owned properties or sites from one site to another. At least that's what I'm reading here.
Mm-hmm.
But set the stage of what Share Cluster is and tell us how the heck did you come up with the idea?
Well, I'm really big on RSS, and I kind of liken this to being RSS on steroids in that it will interoperate through WordPress installs. So a lot of people's WordPress sites will have two similar sites, or maybe they'll have ads they want to see running on multiple places or affiliate links or something like that. So what this does is you can create the content, a piece of an ad or a short snippet of something you'll show off in a widget on one site that has Share Cluster, and then another site that has Share Cluster. will have an authentication code and be able to pull that from the main site to the other site. You create a ring of these sites that all replicate and pull their content. And they go further than just the text or the HTML. They will also pull in the media and keep it locally, so you don't have to worry about, does the originating source, is it up at this moment, is it taxed at this moment. You can load the site you're at, you can load the media that comes with it. So that's the thrust of what ShareCluster does. And yeah, it's there to satisfy a need where I have a lot of related properties and I wanted to have a way to share them out, and somebody I worked with, he had that need as well, because he had a number of related sites and wanted to share this stuff around.
Coming from Drupal, one would say, why not start with a module? Why the plugin? So go ahead, answer that.
Yeah, two things. Number one, because I like WordPress, I want to do a WordPress plugin. I want to really get into WordPress, and the cheap way for me to do that was the plugin I put into the repo. I thought that if you look at how many more users are, how many more sites are running WordPress than there are Drupal, it just seemed like I would be able to put this out to a much larger audience and be able to satisfy that need. And two, WordPress seems to have this comfort with it being .org repos, free open source plugins, and right beside them there are the premium equipment. So I thought that the ShareCluster client that I'm running off of my site for sale, and that way I can monetize it, because the way Drupal things are monetized in software is on custom consulting. There's somebody who is I've engaged developers who trick out their modules on my behalf, so work with them on the clock. And it seems like the Drupal approach is modules to get consulting time, which I want to move away from. Plugins get you towards products and product sales, and that idea of passive income.
Is it safe to say, and from what I'm hearing from you, is WordPress is just an easier market to enter for this kind of thing?
It's an easier market. It's a bigger market. Again, the version jumps means that when they go to WordPress 3.92 or keep going higher, it's going to stay relevant and useful. I'm not going to have to worry about bringing it up to version jump and basically recoding it entirely, which is the Drupal problem. So that's the big comfort that I see with that, as well as how many more people
One of the questions I haven't asked anybody yet on the show, because no one has. You're just getting into this market, so I'm interested to hear your experience in submitting a plugin to .org. What was that like? Scary, not scary, difficult, not difficult, and is there a big difference, or is there a contrast between contributing to .org versus contributing to the Drupal community?
There's a big difference there. Yeah, so winding back to your first question, I thought it would be a little bit more scary and daunting, but it really wasn't that hard. I had to have a .org ID and be validated. I went to the plugin add thing. It's not obvious how you add plugins, but once you find it, then it is obvious, right? It's one of those strategies. So I submitted the plugin. There was a few things in the code that wasn't compliant, and some stuff that just I knew I could take out without jeopardizing what the plugin behaved like. So it was back and forth, and that was really nice to see that they'd ask for an edit, I'd make an edit, I'd resubmit, there'd be another one coming back. And the really cool thing about that was, even though I was using up their time for reviewing the code and successive rounds, I didn't feel like they were running out of patience, and that was really appreciated. There was that almost like it was a welcoming feel that if I was willing to make the changes, they were willing to keep dancing. And there's a 7-day period between submitting and having it approved, and I went over that 7 days, so that meant that my original submission got canceled and I resubmitted. But in my last round, I said, yeah, if you resubmit after this date, it's probably good to go, so just resubmit. And a day later, it wasn't a refund. So that was really nice. And then I had to, use SVN to post the stuff in, and I have a lovely SVN, so that was fine. That's got into it. Compare that to Drupal, and years back, 2007, 2006. 2006, I got really sexed up about the idea of submitting modules to Drupal. And I applied for an account, and I had to sort of justify my account. And I had a little public rant about why it seemed so hard to do it. And Dries contacted me and said, what are you trying to do? I said, I'm just trying to get a repo account published. He goes, oh, well, let's go and do this. and basically greenlighted me to be able to do submissions. But it had really soured me up at that point. So I'm active. I post captions. I weigh in on stuff at Drupal.org, but it didn't feel as smooth a ride in Drupal. And they've since then gone from, I think it was CBS at the time, to SVN, and now they're on to using Git for their posting. So again, it's that version jump mindset where everyone thinks we're just moving out, and that's not a problem, which I think fewer moves the better. SVN and Git, they're different, but I like that they're okay, either one. So that's one of the things. It was a much funkier road to put stuff into Drupal. I've put in Drupal modules, but they sort of sit in sandbox land as opposed to full module. So I posted to GitHub, this evolve them out. And it just feels like WordPress is a lot more documented, not just Drupal. Or WordPress the plugins than Drupal the modules.
Yeah. Do you remember your reviewer's name? Was it Pippin or Mika on the plugin?
Mika. It was
nice.
Mika. And he was, like I said, really, I never got the feeling like he's like, oh, you're not done yet. I never got that vibe from him, so I was really appreciative that's how he approached it.
Awesome.
Then I tried to reciprocate.
Awesome. Score one for the good guys. Now, launching a product, obviously a whole new challenge. Interested to hear what your immediate challenge is for the plugin and where you're looking to sort of learn different aspects. So if you're in a marketing issue right now and you're trying to figure out how do I market this, or if maybe you're in a pricing scenario where how do I price my pro side of the house, interested to hear what your challenges are and what you're trying to do to kind of tackle those.
Well, what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to just get the word out generally. Publishing blog posts and then a 90-day blog self-challenge. I have 90 days of blog posts with some of them about plugins and about WordPress. And I went out the other day and talked about the next plugin and what that could be as a way to talk about the current plugin and get the exposure for that. And so it's really just trying to get the word out in general, contact enough places, go to people who said they had an interest in the past for this, and say, here it is, it's now done, you want to check it out. I set up I used WooCommerce to set up a licensing system. So the Pro version has a licensing piece to it, so you have to put in a license fee. You get your automatic download of the Pro version, all that sort of nice stuff that is very turnkey inside of WooCommerce. And the nice thing about that too, you let me give them Bishop discounts and coupons. So if I need those to kind of sweeten the deal for somebody, or if I want to give somebody something and say, go buy it, use your 100% coupon discount, go for it. That's all possible because it's available in e-commerce. So that's the thing about it is I set up the licensing system and try to set up as much flexibility through marketing as many way possible. So if I need to heavily discount or put it on a super low sale, I just come out of doing ebooks last year on Amazon, and their system was really it was good, but it was very fixed, and you can tell I had to run through a lot of steps. And this year, when I start to get on ebooks, we're going to do a lot more wins for the coupons and discounts to really drive people to get that sort of attention. Like, come on, you have to go right now.
Yeah.
Thing, right?
Yeah. That's awesome stuff. The the marketing side, the communication side, it's awesome that you're doing the 90-day blog challenge. I mean, I was at the recent WordPress Boston meetup, and there, like many of us in the room, freelancers or people who are looking to build products and services and really get their names out there. And I asked how many folks in the audience are actually doing some form of content marketing, be it the basic blog of information or a podcast or some training tutorials, so on and so forth. And nobody raised their hands except for the other guys that were speaking after me, right? Because they were up there trying to talk about their product. So I'm glad to hear that you do that, and really, I don't know what it is. I mean, I guess some folks are sort of toying with the idea, and it sounds nice, and maybe in their heads they're like, well, someday I'm going to launch a product. Well, someday should have been yesterday, and if it wasn't, then you should really start today, and just simply start talking about it. We're building a plug, and I'm not saying it's easy, right? Because we all go through it, right? We all go through it. There is no perfect science to this. If it was, everyone would have their business finished, right? It's just no perfect science, and even I, with an audience, struggle to figure out how will I market our next plugin? How do I do this? And it's like, it's right in there in front of you. And even us veterans are still struggling to do it. Let's talk about future features of the plugin. Oh, actually, no. First, there was the question from the last interview that we did. You actually spent like 3,000 hours developing your own licensing system, and then you did
like 3,000.
Then you did the old smack on the head and said, "Oh my God, it's right here in front of me in this already accessible plugin." What was that like, and how did you come about it?
Well, the course was because I am fairly heavy into Drupal. I thought, let's start with Drupal. My main website is Drupal, so let's see if I can just pack on e-commerce functionality that allows downloads and licensing in Drupal. And there are those pieces available. But then I had to say, well, it's not available as I wanted in Drupal 7, so I went down to Drupal 6 with a separate site. I did that for a while. That was semi-fruitful. I found there was a lot of code I'd have to build to make that work. So I said, you know what? I'm releasing a WordPress plugin and I'm experienced in e-commerce. Why not I just try to go that way? So then I launched, I put out a WooCommerce install, but I was kind of cheap for a moment, so I thought, well, there's a free licensing fee plugin available, so I tried that out, and the free one was sort of okay. It had some features, but it had some big gaps. It didn't auto-generate keys, which is a big showstopper for me. So then I angsted over that a little bit and tried to make it work, and spent a lot of hours on that for no good reason in retrospect. And then just went back to WooCommerce, and there's the license key plugin, and it's like 120, 130 bucks, something like that. And it's like, well, you take my hourly rate and divide it by 130 bucks. It was such a no-brainer that was the solution, was just to buy something off the shelf that worked just fine, that had been ruggedized before I ever got to it. So, yeah, I took a long way to a short solution.
Yeah, many of us do, and we sort of just get our blinders on, and sometimes, we're building plugins and we're like, oh, no, a plugin's not going to solve what I need to do, and then you realize, oh, I guess it could have, and then we spent all that time either designing or developing something that's already existing. It's just tough, right? You don't know until you start diving into it, and then you're finding it, and hey, this is sort of the lesson learned. Managing the future features of the plugin. Maybe you're not even at that point yet, but something that I know a lot of product developers and theme designers struggle with, taking new requests from customers, taking new requests out of your own crazy entrepreneur brain, and which one are you going to chase? How do you manage that stuff now? Is it just slapping everything onto a Trello board, or are you doing like a Scrum board with Post-it notes? What do you do to manage all that stuff?
Right now, it's, Trello is, I'm okay with Trello. But right now, I'm basically keeping a running document of everything that comes in so far, and then I just try to pull that into something cohesive to figure out what the next sets of features are going to be. So it's a little bit klutzy, but that's what I'm doing right now because it's only me, so it's not like currently I don't have to operate for somebody else, so I don't have to have them weigh in and evolve ideas or progress the project at the moment. But once we get into multiple people being on the project, project plugin, this plugin and other plugins, then I tend to turn back and do something like the project. So right now, it's just the economy of it is just I have a Google Doc open as I want to.
Awesome stuff. One of the last formal questions of the interview: if you could take a step back 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, would you do something differently to get to where you are now, or in the product development phase? Anything that, looking back, you would change?
If I were to rewind 10 years, I would probably give myself a slap because I was working at a consulting place about 10 years ago, and I said to them, our thing is clients you're only going to get so much money with, and it's going to be a linear amount of work because so many hours in, so many dollars out, and you can get that formula optimized, but you can't get it exponential like a product could be. And at that point, I had that epiphany, and then I didn't do much with it. I had a little piece of it's an image gallery I put out a shareware with a donate button. I was getting some money from that, and I wish I had looked at that and said, if I really practice, I could do more with it. And that's the 10 years ago. I would have stopped myself there and said, yeah, you have enough years into web development now. At that point, it was 8 years in, and I wish I had said, I'm good enough, I'm conversant enough to be able to move ahead and then start picking up products about it. 5 years ago, we set up those DeWolfe to do products, and I got into custom work to pay the bills. And I wish I'd said, let's go on the starvation diet right now and survive 6 months of hard time, self-made hard times, to be able to put out plugins as much as we can. But instead, I just kept getting drawn in by the lure of custom work, and that distracted me from being able to do plugins.
Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever received from Garrett Moon of Today Made, who recently did an angel round for his plugin CoSchedule at about $500,000. He said that he got to a point where they were building the plugin, it was proven. They are still a services company, so they have a services team, but he really put the focus on sort of that Monday meeting that they always had. Instead of just focusing on the client work that they had, the first thing they put in the Monday meeting was CoSchedule, the plugin, right? Like, here's how we're going to kick off our week by focusing in on our product, because it sets the tone of excitement, the discovery, the whole building a product energy, and really kicking off with that, and that's the focus. And then, oh, by the way, we're still servicing our clients. We're not forgetting about them, but we're not sort of starting off the week with, here's what we have to build, here's the page they want us to change, all of that stuff. Which is great because it pays the bills, and they're still being and it was a great grassroots movement where they used client services to fund up until this point the product, but really putting the focus on, we need to launch this, we need to do good with this product, so let's put it front and center, without sacrificing client stuff. So awesome stuff there. We're going to jump into the second segment of the show. We're going to ask you what's in your toolbox. And, of course, now I'm forgetting what you said last time. See if I could guess it. But the what's in your toolbox, what piece of software or hardware do you use to get through the day? Something you can't live without, something that people might not know about, that like an Evernote, but something more top secret.
Yeah, it's not so much top secret as it's super rugged. And that's a piece of shareware I use called Edit Plus for text editing and web development. And it's pretty rudimentary, but as I said last time, it's unfillable. I have thrown gigabytes of stuff into files in it, and it just keeps on trucking. And it does some pretty good searching for directories. You're able to pull in and search for code, error, functions. A lot of it's very robust, and that's for me the winner. It's nowhere near full IDE, but it's Edit Plus from editplus.com, and it's really solid. It's, like I said, unfillable.
Awesome. So not like a PHP Storm or a Sublime guy or a terminal guy, VIM, or stuff like that.
No. VIM, I just look at it and go, no.
Awesome. We're going to jump into the lightning round, and I'll ask you a series of quick questions, and you'll have a series of quick answers. The one plugin you cannot live without besides your own?
One plugin, SEO by Yoast.
What's your favorite WordPress or business book?
Rox's WordPress plugin development book. It's good. It misses a couple things because of how shows like yours are doing stuff nowadays and talking about the topic. But it's very good.
Awesome. What's a quote that you live or run your business by?
It came from Andrew Wilkinson at MetaLab, who's a guy who did a startup in Victoria. It's take custom work and do no longer have to, and then you can develop your own products as soon as you can.
Awesome. Is that also the best business or career advice you ever received, or is it something else?
No, I think that is really strong advice I'm living by, which is, do something, make sure you're getting the bill paid for, but you got to plan for the future. That's product development.
Awesome. What's the longest a client project has ever taken you?
Over a year, about a year and 4 months now, and I say now because I'm still going through it. It's pretty painful. That's right. It's all the more encouragement to not do custom work anymore.
Yeah, we recently launched one of our longest ones, which took about 2 years, and that was just waiting on content and changes and so on and so forth. Never fun. If you had to switch to another CMS, what would it be?
Or going from WordPress would be to Drupal, or I'd probably try one of the newer ones that emerged and see what I can do about getting them serving down there and evolving those ones, which I've tried a few and I just haven't got anyone out there to try.
Awesome. Who should I interview next?
I did mention Yoast earlier.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Uh, Maybe even Andrew Wilkinson from MetaLab. Even though he's not so much a WordPress guy, he's more MetaLab is called Rooms and Tumblr, but he's really strong on products.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to get in other angles, other perspectives, not just the same old WordPress stuff.
Yeah.
What's the one question I didn't ask you that I should have?
How long I've been in the game? How long I've been in the game?
And how long? And
18
how long
years.
have you been here, master?
18 years of web development, but I started programming in the 80s.
Very nice. What language were you coding in back in the 80s?
AppleSoft Basic.
Nice. Yeah, my first development class wasn't until the late 90s, so that was Basic. I think Basic 2. Basic 2 and then Pascal. And then HTML, and I was like, I am not a developer. I am not a developer. What am I doing here? Awesome stuff, Shawn. Thanks a lot. Thanks for doing the show. Where can folks find you and find your product on the web so they can say thanks?
My company website is thosedewolfes.com, and we have a product link that takes you to SharePlus or other products that we're still kind of percolating. And my personal blog, where I'm doing a blog challenge, is shawn.dewolfe.bc.ca.
Awesome. Shawn, it's been a great interview, great third interview. So I wish you all the best with everything that you're doing. It sounds awesome. And maybe in a year's time we check back and see if you're on a yacht the next time that we do this interview.
That'd be fantastic.
Just selling Share Cluster all over the place.
Okay.
Everyone else, mattreport.com/subscribe. Join the mailing list. Mattreport.com/join. Join the pro membership where you can learn how to build a better WordPress business inside the Matt Report Pro community. Other than that, thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll see you next time.